What is fileLess malware? fileLess malware is malicious code that works directly within a computer's memory instead of the hard drive. It uses legitimate, otherwise benevolent programs to compromise your computer instead of malicious files. It is fileLess, in that when your machine gets infected, no files are downloaded to your hard drive. This makes fileLess malware analysis somewhat more difficult than detecting and destroying viruses and other forms of malware protection that get installed directly on your hard drive. Because fileLess malware attacks require no malicious files, traditional antivirus tools that perform hardware scans to locate threats may miss them altogether. This does not mean fileLess malware detection is impossible, however. fileLess malware includes code that does several things regular viruses can do, including data exfiltration. These kinds of malicious activities can trigger a scan. Then security personnel can start fileLess malware mitigation steps, which often involve scanning the command lines of trusted applications, such as Microsoft Windows PowerShell, which is used to automate tasks. In a sense, even though fileLess malware can run, it cannot hide. Unlike traditional malware, fileLess malware does not require an attacker to install any code on a target system, making it hard to detect. How does fileLess malware work? fileLess malware works by going straight into your computer's memory. This means the malicious code never enters your hard drive. How it gets there is very similar to how other malicious code gets into your system. For instance, a user gets tricked into clicking on a link or an attachment that a hacker puts inside a phishing email. The attacker may use social engineering to manipulate the emotions of the victim and get them to click on the attachment or link. The malware is then introduced into your system and begins to move from one device to another. Attackers use fileLess malware to gain access to data they can either steal or use to sabotage the operations of an organization. fileLess malware hides by using applications administrators would usually trust, such as Windows script programs or PowerShell. Often, these are among the applications an organization whitelists. fileLess malware is not a rogue program sitting in a file all its own on your hard drive. Instead, it corrupts a trusted program, making it more difficult to detect. fileLess malware's strongest attribute, at least from the perspective of attackers, is they do not have to try to evade antivirus programs to get it on your computer. This is because fileLess malware alters the command lines, which are lines of code that tell programs what to do. A regular antivirus program may not be able to identify the threat because there is no anomalous file associated with it. Most applications and file-based malware begin as a file that is written to the disk. When that file is executed, a copy is loaded into memory, and the program's commands are executed. fileLess malware skips the step of being written to disk, existing only in memory. Some of the ways in which this can be accomplished include living off the land. Many of the actions that malware performs can be accomplished with legitimate system functionality. fileLess malware commonly uses PowerShell in order to access the built-in Windows API functions that would normally be used in malicious executable file. Malicious documents. A Microsoft Office document may include malicious macros that use PowerShell to execute commands. This could include downloading and running additional malware without writing it to disk. Vulnerability exploitation. An application may contain a buffer overflow or other remote code execution vulnerability. By exploiting this vulnerability, an attacker can run malicious commands within the vulnerable process without writing anything to disk. Process hijacking. Once a file is loaded into memory, its memory space can be modified. Malware can write code to the memory space of an existing process and launch its malicious functionality within that process. Registry-based malware. The Windows registry contains configuration information for the Windows OS, including autoruns. Fileless malware can define an autorun that launches malicious code via lol bins on system startup, or when a user logs in. Why use PowerShell for fileless attacks? PowerShell gives attackers quick access to system functions of the operating system and is accepted as a legitimate, trusted tool. There are many reasons attackers use PowerShell for fileless attacks, including: installed by default. PowerShell is installed by default on Windows. Trusted and frequented. Sysadmins frequently use and trust PowerShell. It is not unusual to see a PowerShell process running in an enterprise environment. Easy to obfuscate. PowerShell scripts are easy to obfuscate and can be difficult to detect with legacy security tools. Gives remote access. PowerShell has remote access capabilities available by default, so attackers can use it remotely. Consider how much easier it is for an attacker to use an existing tool like PowerShell that has functionality built into it to not only communicate externally with the attacker, but also make a wide array of changes directly to the operating system. This is the potential of using PowerShell for attacks. Stages of a fileless attack. A fileless malware attack looks very similar to a file-based malware attack. Some of the key stages include: initial access. Malware needs a means of gaining access to an organization's systems. Fileless malware may deliver a malicious document via phishing or exploit a vulnerable web application. Execution. Fileless malware can achieve code execution via various means. For example, a malicious document may use social engineering to trick the recipient into enabling macros, allowing malicious macros to run PowerShell commands. Persistence. Once malware gains access to a target system, it wants to maintain that access. Adding autorun keys to the Windows registry is a common means of achieving persistence, and can be accomplished without writing code to disk. Objectives. Malware is designed to accomplish some task. Fileless malware may attempt to steal credentials, encrypt files, download additional malware, or perform some other malicious activity. Here are some common types of fileless malware. Several major types of fileless malware include: memory resident malware. Exists solely within the memory of a valid Windows file, rendering the malware fileless and resistant to detection by standard antivirus tools. Windows registry resident malware. This malware remains in the Windows registry, using a program known as a dropper to insert harmful code. It can be set to run whenever the system starts, bypassing traditional antivirus scans. Rootkits. Rootkits exist within the operating system kernel rather than a file. Rootkits masquerade as the normal operating system, allowing them to completely evade detection. Exploit kits. Exploit kits are sets of tools targeting system vulnerabilities. They target the system memory without writing to the storage media. They include exploits for multiple vulnerabilities and a management console. Some even scan existing vulnerabilities and launch tailored attacks instantly. Fileless ransomware. Today's ransomware attacks use fileless tactics, concealing malicious code in documents through macros or exploiting memory. This enables ransomware to control built-in system tools like PowerShell, encrypting files without leaving a trace on the system. False credentials. The threat actor gains access to the system using the compromised username and password combinations to implement a shell code to execute an attack. They remain persistent in the system by hiding code in the registry or kernel, or by creating user accounts for system access.